welcome everyone to the 25th edition of the Australian Association of Street Photographers Inc. Speaker Series, and the first for 2022. My name is Russell Mason, Vice President of AASPI and your host for tonight. To start off, I'd just like to ask everyone to keep their devices set to mute during the presentation. If you have any questions during tonight's talk, please type them into the chat function of your Zoom screen, and our moderator, Adrienne Weir, will pose your questions to Phil at the end of the talk. Okay, tonight's speaker, we're excited to have Melbourne-based photographer Phil Roubin. Now, Phil is a photographer whose work is based upon a personal documentary style, focusing on human emotions captured in expressive, high-contrast black and white imagery. His work's been exhibited extensively and has been included in several prominent art prizes, such as the National Photographic Portrait Prize, the Josephine Ulrich and Wynne Schubert Photo Prize, the Moran Photographic Prize, and Olive Cotton Prize for Portraiture. Editions of his photographs are held in public and private collections within Australia and abroad. Phil's projects have taken him through the Asian and European continents, and he's currently based in Melbourne, Australia. So tonight's session is titled From Capturing Family to Street Life and Falling in Love with Photography Again. So on behalf of the AASPI committee, I'd like to welcome all members and guests to tonight's presentation. And here he is. It's over to you, Phil.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure. So what I'll do, I'll just go to present now and wow. And is that okay? Is that showing? Yep. Okay, great. All right, great. Okay, so yeah, welcome to this presentation I've put forward. I've broken it down into I guess 3 points of interest. They're not sequential, but I do chop and change from what I'm going to be talking about this evening. But I guess art or art making isn't always sequential, so perhaps some of you understand that it can get a bit kind of messy at times when you're in the process of creativity or working on projects and so forth. So I've called it From Capturing Family to Street Life and Falling in Love with Photography Again. I'm taking you back to 2013, 2014, and you're probably looking at this and thinking, why am I showing you this? That is me there. I had given up on photography. I've had enough. I'm sick of it. And my partner and I went to live over in Europe. So in 2013 to late 2014, we were in Europe, and I decided I wanted to paint. I thought, why not? Why don't I paint? My wife could work remotely as well. She's a graphic designer. So I'd done so much work. And there's a few reasons why I sort of gave up and thought, well, I'm done with photography. I want to try something new. And I thought, why not painting? I had friends who did painting, so why don't I give it a go? So I kind of spent nearly 2 years painting, and those 2 years not really doing any photography. The only kind of photos that I did were photos to do with maybe references that I could use for photography, and not necessarily photos that could stand alone. So I will get to the reasons why I gave up photography. These photos from Istanbul. So I was living in Istanbul for about 4 months. And if any of you know what Istanbul is like, it's amazing. It's an amazing city. And you only have to look at like Alex Webb, for example, for the body of work that he created in Istanbul to have an understanding of how much a photographable city it is. However, I didn't really take many photos, and these 3 photos that I took were probably the most photo kind of photos and not reference photos or paintings that I took in that period. And for me, these photos don't really show too much love of photography. They're just kind of very just documenting a scene. The other photos I took were photos of my partner and I, and like I said, like still life, streets, things, objects that I could paint. So in this period, I was kind of hanging out in Istanbul and having a good time. It's a really good time, to be honest, and enjoying food, but a lot of food, but not really doing much photography of any, as like I said, the photography was not for the love of photography. At the same time, Jason Eskenazi was in Istanbul as well. He was concluding the Black Garden series, which was a trilogy. He'd already released Wonderland, which is like a sort of underground, seminal underground photo book that he put out years before. So he was there. He was actually Jason Eskenazi and Charlie Kirk, who was also working on Katil Kar, was going to a wine bar about 2 blocks from where I was living, my partner and I was living, and the owner, it was a lovely wine bar, the owner kept saying, "Oh, you've got to come back. I know this American and this English photographer, they keep coming, they come here." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's cool." I didn't really, care to want to, in hindsight now, I would have been, that would have been great to talk to these 2 photographers, particularly Charlie Kirk, who has an absolutely amazing knowledge of photography and the history of photography. And we'd go time and time again to this bar, and he'd say, "Oh, they were here earlier," or, "No, not tonight." And I was just like, "Oh, okay, that's fine. So now we're just like doing these amazing bodies of work in Turkey, and basing themselves in Istanbul, and I was out on the balcony doing my paintings with my Van Gogh hat on, and kind of oblivious. So it was kind of funny to find this out. Actually, it was actually a couple of years later that I actually did find out that it was Charlie Kirk and Jason Eskenazi. So it was a funny kind of sliding door kind of moment. So why did I give up photography? Well, pre 2013, from about 2007 to 2013, I had explored quite a few different avenues of photography, from portraiture to doing like still life and documentary style photography, obviously color as well as black and white. I had several exhibitions and kind of got myself embedded into the art world of trying to move forward, make progress essentially in the art world, or art world of photography, the art world, Australian art world, and so forth. And it got to the point where I'd kind of thought, well, I kind of got stuck. I was like to this point where there's a lot of kind of politics in a way, and it's not just you. There's other people getting involved, and I kind of hit roadblocks. And I thought, well, I'm not getting any further forward. I didn't like what people were telling me, and particularly I got to a point where there was this particular kind of moment, this particular body of work that I created, which I thought was a summation of everything I'd kind of learnt at that stage from 7 years of experience of going fairly hard with photography, as well as teaching photography and gathering a lot of history behind me in how to approach photography. And essentially, I loved documentary photography, and I see myself as like a portrait photographer, even though when I'm doing street photography, there's that kind of very kind of humanistic psyche of people, the experience of people near me, looking at that emotional kind of resonance when I'm trying to make pictures. So that's constantly there. So that's kind of been a constant, but it got to the point where I was like, okay, I've done this work which I felt I was proud of. But I hit a roadblock, and this particular work that I created was it came into two bodies of work. There was the Roads to Northern China, which I titled, and then I had another body of work which was called Schools of Yichuan, I think is how you say it. So I had this amazing opportunity to go to China, not like on a tourist trip, but with someone that had lived in China for 4 years, that had lived in some fairly remote areas of China as well, teaching English, kind of Wild West in a way. And he said, look, I'm going back. I'm going to go. It was almost like a reunion. You should come with me. It's going to be pretty wild. And so I spent 3 weeks in China on this Wild West adventure. And it was wild. It was a little bit scary at times. I've traveled on the Trans-Siberian in the middle of winter. Lost my baggage for a week. Taken photos in Russian gulags at minus 40 degrees. So I kind of experienced that kind of harshness, but it was nothing like going into these parts of China. And it was terribly exciting, but yeah, very nerve-wracking at times as well. My friend wanted to go up to Dandong, and this particular photo that we're looking at is of a North Korean patrol boat. We paid the driver an extra, I think, $50 Australian to take us along the river of Dandong, which is, it's where China ends and North Korea starts. And he got pretty close to this patrol boat. You can see the backwash coming off the motor, outboard motor. And I think the guy's reading a paper, the crew member. He pointed, and it was one of those moments that I'll never forget. And the driver that we was taking this along, he was just laughing. He thought it was hilarious. So a very strange and sort of surreal moment. I'm starting here because this is, I don't know, for some reason I just wanted to start here because this is kind of an area that kind of, when I look at these photos, I have trouble processing these photos that I took. This is looking over, this is the bridge that goes into China, from China into North Korea. And the trains usually go at night. And this is the view from the hotel room. So the hotel staff are very kind to give us a room with a view into, it was quite foggy that afternoon. And so I just took this in the late afternoon, almost coming into evening. A photo of night. So the Chinese light up the bridge at night. I haven't done any dodging, burning in the background. That is like where that blackness is. There is a bit of a small kind of town in North Korea there. It's dark at night. They don't really keep any, it's quite eerie. They don't keep any lights on there. When we were there, it was very spooky. I don't know. I included this sign. It was kind of, when we went onto the river, there was this sign there. In the top left, it says, cherish, there's like rules for going on the river. Cherish a good life, abide by the border regulations, which I think is quite a sweet kind of sign to have, or little illustration to have here. The one here is forbidden to take photos of North Korean soldiers. I kind of bent that rule a little bit, and others are fairly obvious ones, like don't cross over the border, don't try and sell drugs, and so forth. But it was just a funny reminder. I actually came through this when I was preparing for the presentation. I saw this and went, oh yeah, that was kind of just down near the docks. This strange kind of the contrast, the dichotomy of being in China, and then you can see there's the bridge and North Korea in the background, and there's it's interesting. It's not a photo. I included it because just that kind of the expressions. I guess the people there, they live with it, and it was very strange to walk along this shoreline here and just kind of see the locals, how they kind of were going about their daily lives and looking across. I guess for me, being a Westerner, looking across into North Korea. So there was that aspect to it. There was you drive along the esplanade there, and this was there'd be European cars, there'd be Korean barbecues, which we went to one night. All these very westernized kind of culture there. Yet across the river, there's North Korea, and then you go in a few streets, and there was this kind of also dystopian kind of look as well, as I was traversing around the streets of Dandong. I think for me, being the summation, because I'd had so much experience of dealing with people, taking portraits of so many different people over the years, I was very comfortable. It was very easy for me to get into the zone, to photograph and get up close, to get close to people. I should mention at this time as well, with the photography, before coming over to do this project, I was quite in awe of Diane Arbus and also August Sander as well. So that very kind of humanistic approach to photography. I just included this in. I came across it, and it was just this very. And there's a lot of kind of contradictions and strangeness in China, and from this kind of work, I just scraped the surface, because China is a huge country, but there's something about the cactus, the fake cactus. This is a building, again, it wasn't being actually used. I think it was meant to be apartments or hotel, but you're looking out over to North Korea on this building, but it wasn't occupied, it was locked up. It's like there was quite a few buildings you come across like that, where they leave them and they get bought, and then nobody occupies them ever, or maybe not. I don't know. It's strangeness. So I had this opportunity. As I said, I was traveling for a companion. He lived there, so he had a lot of insider knowledge. He could speak fairly fluent Chinese. And he took me to these places where he lived, which were not what I expected at all. So we walked around the areas. This guy was actually making popcorn, by the way. Markets. Generally, that people sort of focus in the street photography. So that I like quietness as well. I kind of like that sense of quietness that can happen if you're sort of taking portraits on the street. This is actually near Dalian. She was about to dive for mussels, and I was looking at this photo when I was preparing this slide, and I was looking and going, oh, she's got the rope. I think because her husband was there, the husband would hold on to the rope and she'd go out. So you had the rope. Like it was calm. It was like you could see the calm. It was a sunny day, really calm water. I thought there was something kind of funny about that. The husband holding on, going to bring her back, like she's like a mermaid, was going to get away or something like that. So the main project I went to was to do this. It was called this. I called it Schools of Yuxuan, and I went to about 4 schools there. I decided to show this in color because this was how it was proposed and how it was published as well. So it was published in a magazine. Like, it was published in a big issue, and I think syndicated from Australia over to UK as well. So it was published in color. It was probably like it was just one of the few bodies of work that, for me, it worked in color as well. So I had someone. It was like a ticket to just take photos as you please, over this sort of 2-week period as we visited, I think, 5 or 6 schools. I finished the work. I kind of like this photo of this guy, this kind of slacker kind of guy. He rocked up late, and I thought it's so funny because I teach as well, so I'm like, I know this sort, for the drill parade. So the work was completed, and it was planned to be a major exhibition at a public gallery in Melbourne. And this is when this whole roadblock started happening, and when your boards were involved, and the boards say no, but then the curator had said yes, and so that kind of, at this point, when I'd put all this work and effort in, and perhaps there's a little bit artist ego there as well, thinking, well, I've done this work, it's great work, what more do you want? And then I'm getting involved in politics, and I particularly remember a conversation I had with back then, which was late 2013, with the director of the Australian Centre for Photography at the time. And he said to me, could maybe you go back and get some more photos, get some more edgy kind of photos. And I don't really do edgy kind of photos like that. I don't do that kind of hard kind of documentary type photography. It's more my approach to documentary photography or street photography is a bit more warmth, And I remember you saying that, and I was just thinking in my head at the time, how, are you serious? Like, I can't go back here. It's like, and there's already, poured in X amount of dollars into this project of, and this is no way. I just thought this is such a silly thing to say. So we did this sort of setups to schools where I could sort of, having the more kind of fly on the wall approach to the work, getting access to some amazing sort of kind of photos in the classroom and whatnot. And it was great because I had my companion. I'd go, you go out the front and just talk something. I don't know, just talk whatever. Just talk to them, and then I could get in and walk around the classrooms and take photos and get down low and get the shots. And they wouldn't be looking at me; they'd be looking at him. And he was quite tall as well, so it was great to sort of have this. I was just fortunate to have that, and as well as doing more setup, photography, portraits, and so forth. So it's kind of funny. It was this project as well, which kind of broke the camel's back in a way. It was like after this, and I thought, well, I'm done. I'm done with photography, doing this. I just want to do something completely different. And at the time, my wife was saying, well, I want to go overseas. And I thought, let's do something completely different. And I had, like I said earlier, I had friends who were doing painting. I said, why don't I try painting? So I did. Fight Club is a project I did. I wanted to show this work because it's still my approach in the photography I do, the street style photography that I do. I use this approach. Fight Club was a project I did over maybe 2 years. Went up to Queensland about 4 times. Actually, onto the Gold Coast. So I had a lead. I had someone I knew through someone who did mixed martial arts, and I was like, great. This is just what I wanted to see. I wanted, first of all, I wanted to shoot it in the most non-cliche ways I could, and I just was interested as well. I wanted to know what the people were like that did this. Are they the stereotypical kind of people, or is it not? And so it was really interesting, to see it. It was absolutely terrible lighting. This predates the work I did in China, several years before. So I was lucky to I shot it digital, and I no flash when I was actually shooting, except for the portraits I took, which I was using some remote kind of strobe setups. And yeah, it was kind of interesting, to see, like I'd take these portraits, like for example, this girl who was actually quite feared by a lot of people. I think she was a state champion or something like that. To these other, getting these kind of offhand type portraits, which, like this guy he doesn't look like the typical MMA kind of fighter, if you want to call it that. So these more kind of composed, close, in the ring. I didn't go to any of the actual fights. This was during training sessions and warm-up fights. Really thinking about composition, about the bodies, the positions of the bodies. There's something else. There was this kind of interesting energy there as well, which I really gravitated to, and I just thought was really interesting, which made me do the repeat trips up to Queensland for it. And I think it was almost this sculptural energy. People said, "Oh, it's the Francis Bacon was really into wrestling." Francis Bacon painter. It's where he got a lot of influence for his paintings, and I could see that when I was, in there and taking the photos. And it was almost this strange kind of sexual kind of energy that was happening as well, which was really unusual. It was really bizarre. There was these guys, which was kind of what you would expect, and then there was like guys like this, and he's like built like me. And this is something funny about like the Venom pants. So really thinking about positioning, and again, it was like a goal pass just to kind of move around and be that fly in the wall. And then there's guys like this who are a little bit scary, pretty serious. So that I had a couple of those photos. I felt like the project wasn't finished. I don't know. To me now, it feels like it's finished, but I didn't. I sort of had some of those photos. One of the photos was the very first one I showed with that got into an art prize, and then it got purchased by, I think, Horsham Regional Gallery or something like that. I wasn't sure like what to do. I felt, okay, well, I've got this far with it. I didn't think wanted to publish it or try and get it published. And I just kind of left it. I kind of put it aside. And I'm still, and for quite a few years, I thought, is it finished? Like, do I need to go back and do more? And I'm not sure. At this stage, maybe it does feel like it's a finished project, and maybe it can be used somewhere else down the track. And so I think that's kind of interesting, because I tend to like to work project-based, to think, okay, well, is this project finished or is it not? And it's one of those projects which I don't think it's finished. So as I said earlier, I'm jumping back and forth. I'm not following a kind of sequential kind of narrative in how I'm presenting tonight. But so we came back from Europe, back into Melbourne. So we were actually living in the CBD for a couple of years. And my first daughter came along, and it was just like millions of parents. You start taking photos. I don't want to. I'm only going to show 2 photos because I don't want to come across as like too sentimental, which is fine. But it's just for tonight. I don't want to come across it. There's more to say. Okay, well, I was finding it very hard to do painting, but I started doing the photography, and for some reason, I really wanted to shoot on film as well. Shoot my daughter, have a film, having something there that was tactile, that hopefully would stand the test of time to give to her when she's an adult, if there's any way for probably the quality by then to be able to scan it through a smartphone would be really good for the negs. And I was doing drawings, so I do charcoal drawings. I was teaching drawing and photography, got back into teaching photography, even though I wasn't doing a lot of photography. So I kind of liked the texture of the film grain. I could kind of relate that back to like drawing in a way, the charcoal drawing, the texture it leaves on the tooth of the paper using charcoal. So I liked that. I thought, well, I want to do black and white film, shoot my daughter. And it was when I went to Paris. So we were lucky enough to go to Paris for 6 weeks, and I really started getting back into photography. And I was taking photos of my daughter. I was taking photos along the Seine. I sort of set myself up with a project again, and I thought, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to get back into it. And I had a really great time there, photographing. It was summer. I was doing a lot of photography, and it just felt right. Black and white in particular, it felt really right. But what really kind of made it come together was a couple of actually exhibitions that I went to there, and I was like, I say aha moment. It's like, aha, this is it. This is the reason why I want to get back into photography. And it was an amazing exhibition by Ed Vander Elkson called Love on the Left Bank. And I got to see that. I got to see as well as this exhibition. It was all his retrospective work as well. So I bought the book. The book is like a classic photo book. It's like the desert island photo book that you take. If you've got 10 books or 5 books, you have to have this book. And I fell in love with that book. The character that she used, the protagonist, if you want to call it that, Vali Myers. She's from Melbourne, so she was living in Paris for 20 years or so in the 50s and 60s. And then she had that studio in the Nicholas Building for many years when she returned to Melbourne. So that was great too. There was that connection, that thread. I love the noir-ish kind of look to the work. The narrative, the strong narrative to his work was fantastic. And the contrast, the blacks were really black. So this is just some of his work from that I thought I'd show. And also I saw a very amazing group exhibition of, it was almost like, say, 50 years of Japanese photography as well. Paris being Paris, it was a wonderful exhibition. And a couple of Daido Moriyama stood out to me. Again, the blackness, the blacks in his prints were so black. The blackness was amazing. And also Masahisa Fukasa, who'd done the Ravens book, which another one of those seminal photo books to have. So there was a whole kind of collision of events that came together for me to say, okay, this is it. I want to really kind of charge back in and get back into photography. This is just some of his work. in case you're not familiar. I do recommend having a look at these photographers if you can. So I got back to Melbourne, and I'd taken some teaching work, had teaching work given to me in the city. I was sort of teaching part-time at RMIT in the city, in a particular building I was in. I wasn't on main campus. I was further down in the city. And I had a lot of kind of time between the way they'd scheduled the classes. There was these big blocks of like 3-hour breaks. I don't know why. It was just a bit odd at the time. So I was there a couple of days a week, and I was just like, I've got my camera, film, walk around, just see what's happening around here. Let's just get back into it and see where this goes. And it just slowly started to build up. As a lot of you know, it starts to become quite addictive. The magic, the pull of the street. Whether you're just kind of fishing for something, waiting for something to happen, or you're following someone around, or we've got those moments where it's like, whoa, this is something just happened. I was there. So there's the more you get out, and the more hours you spend out there, the more likely you are to get photos that you like. So I was doing a few different photos, and a few different styles, I should say, not photos. And I did try a little bit of color, and I was like, no, I'm not. It just didn't feel right. So I was back onto the film. So shooting a lot of rolls of film, and it started to click to me that I wanted to get back to that connection. I was enjoying getting close to people. I tried doing some staged portraits, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the look. People would be nervous, or it didn't have the right psychology to it. Whereas in the past, when I do photos of sitters, sometimes I'd go see them a couple of times and really get comfortable with them and get to know them. So I thought, I wanted to approach it differently. And this particular photographer who I came across, Anders Peterson, it was kind of like another light bulb moment. He's still active as a photographer, so he kind of has these street portraits. Often they're candid, but then he do these staged portraits, or meet people on the street or whatnot and get to know them, and do portraits in more, I guess, intimate surroundings. And his work, his imagery, the high contrastness of his work. He'd also studied abstract painting before then transferring or evolving into photography, which Gary Winogrand had studied painting as well. So I kind of like that connection as well, of these photographers that actually hadn't studied photography, had studied other disciplines. And there's just something about his work. I listened to quite a few of his I come across some of his audio recordings and interviews, just read as much as I could on his work. And there's actually another photographer who he mentored, which is Jacob Osobol. So Anders Peterson's Swedish and Jacob's Dutch, but they've done books together. So Jacob is highly influenced by Anders Peterson, and Jacob is a Magnum photographer as well. And it's interesting because Jacob gave up photography for several years. He's only just started getting back into photography as well. So he'd done so much work and just threw it all in. Anders Peterson, it was just this point, if I felt like, okay, something's not working, I had his book, so I'd think about him, read something about him, and go, this will get me inspired again to go, this is how I need to do it. So I thought, okay, I'll give myself a project. I didn't want it to, I narrowed it down to the people and being my own personal experience. So like I said earlier, I don't do hard hitting documentary photography or in your face. I kind of want some kind of warmth, even when it doesn't like there might be warmth there. There is some kind of warmth there, and the focus being on the people I would personally come across. So I didn't think there was a need to over conceptualize the work, to keep it fairly simple, humanistic, and focus on the people as well, not get kind of too kind of disjointed. Like, for example, like Eugene Smith trying to do that. You know, he set himself such a massive project with, I think it was Detroit or whatever the city was, that it almost drove him mad, drove him insane, trying to document every aspect of that city. So I did have to kind of bring it in, just kind of streamline it. So I started creating this project. Ended up calling it Mixed Feelings, and just shooting as much as I could on the streets of Melbourne, really looking for people. Sometimes you go out, you get nothing, or sometimes you go out and be great, or just didn't feel like it. And strictly black and white. I love the visual language of black and white, and particularly now, I can't see myself moving away from black and white. It just feels right for what I want to do. And there's so much of a range, of a scope, even when you're working in black and white as well. And for me, of course, loving that blackness in the work is what I kind of, as well as the light, is what I'm really looking for. I tend to photograph. I'm not that patient. I tend to walk a lot. I like the exercise. I haven't been getting as much exercise over the past 6 or 8 months, as you would all know, for various reasons. So I'm looking forward to getting a bit more exercise and getting back into the city. So I'm a little bit impatient. I have spots that I go to, or I just roam and just see what happens. Just go after magic. So I was shooting a lot of film, and then I moved over to using some digital as well. The film costs, I just didn't have the time for small children as well to develop the film, so I was having to get the film developed externally. But predominantly this project, let's say 80% of the project was shot on film. Usually pushed a couple of stops. Let's check what time's looking good. So this came together. The project has come together as a book. And the book, like a lot of projects at the moment, the book was pretty much completed just prior to the pandemic. So I guess at the very beginning of 2020, it was almost ready to go, and then things just started shutting down, and for various reasons, I just delayed it, and then it got to the point where I'd done a mock-up. I'd spent countless hours, shortlisting work. I sent an email. I was early on, pre-pandemic. I contacted Jacob Sobel in Denmark, and I was thinking of going over there because he was running programs where you could go to him, stay at his farm, and he would edit the work with you. It sounded like a good idea at the time, but then I was thinking, well, I've already spent this amount of money on it, and my partner's saying, it sounds good, but you've already spent this amount of money on it, then you're going to spend all this extra money just to go over there and have him edit the work. So in the end, I had to pull in the funding, and I've had some people that I know, but I could trust to help with the editing process for the book. I like getting close to people, but again, that's the way I am with people, having that knowledge, those skill sets, doing portrait photography, getting, I guess, some of the psychological kind of things you build up in your mind, you can carry through and use on the street. So generally I don't have too many issues with getting close to people. So the book, it went through to, this is kind of the second version. The first version I've got here, but I'll make too much noise to get out of the cupboard, had Swiss binding, completely different cover, where this one has a more traditional cover, and it's quite difficult to because I had intended the book to be printed as a digital run. It's quite difficult to print black and white digital. You get casts, color casts in your images, not all the time, but some of the times. And sometimes that can be problematic, particularly coming from doing fine art printing, doing really high-end inkjet printing for exhibitions. I ended up getting a hold of paper which comes from the US, which is very expensive now, but it kind of alleviates about 90% of the color cast that you get when you're printing black and white. So my intention was to do a limited run of, say, like 100. Now I'm kind of at the point where I'm thinking maybe I need to investigate maybe going to offset printing, which is perfect because you can, you're using duotones, tritones printing, you get beautiful blacks, and maybe waiting. So that's going to incur a lot more costs, of course, because you usually have to, the minimum that some boutique offset printers do is only like 250. So I'm going to have to print more, and it's going to cost a lot more as well. And then there's other things like shipping overseas. A lot of people that are interested overseas, so the shipping costs have gone through the roof to print overseas as well. So it's kind of I'm thinking something's going to be happening this year. I'm just not sure how many are going to be printed, or whether it's going to be the first batch is printed like this in digital, and then I do another subsequent batch as offset printing. So that kind of, that concludes my presentation. So hopefully, you've gotten something out of it. And I'll just end that now. And stop sharing, stop presenting. Yep, there we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. That was great. If anyone has any questions, either please put them into the chat and I can pass it on to Phil, or unmute yourself and just ask Phil yourself. Quiet audience today.
Quiet.
No, I'll go with something then, Adrian and Phil. With the timeline of those shots that you showed us at the start, you were showing a lot of high contrasty photos, and I thought that was earlier on in your kind of story. So, and then later on, you were looking at Peterson, Moriyama, and those guys and all that. So, was there anyone that influenced you way back at the start to shoot like that, and then you gravitated towards those other artists, or was there some artist or shooter that made you go for that?
It was, I think, definitely because of there's Robert Frank, Diane Arbus in particular, because she used a flash often when she was doing her street portraits. So there was that high contrast in her work. And also the light as well. I suppose it was just, back then it was just purely incidental, because obviously when I was doing, shooting the MMA, the light, that's so contrasty. And it suited, that high contrast really suited. And also when we were in China, often the areas we were was quite sunny as well. Yeah, there was that. I guess you had that contrast being outdoors in the middle of the day and whatnot, shooting on the street as well. So, yeah, it wasn't. So, I guess for that kind of high contrast, definitely probably Diane Arbus, but it was just the artists that you would look at, you know, like the Bressons, and then all the Magnum photographers that I was looking at as well. I suppose Eugene Smith, he's like a darkroom master, so you know I sort of looked at his work back then as well. Yeah, so it wasn't until later, really, that later in the piece that I really kind of, particularly when I went to Paris, that I saw these European photographers that and the Japanese photographers that really sparked my approach. Yeah.
So, Phil, I've got a similar question here from Laurie and Sally. So, do you talk to your subject when you're up close in their space?
I tend to just. I found when I was taught, if I go up and say, "Hi, can I take a portrait?" The photos that I looked at, they just weren't working. So I quickly changed my approach and would go, "Okay, I'll take the photo." That kind of shoot first, ask questions later. So I'd take a photo, and either the subject, the people would just move on, or they'd stop and kind of smile and go, "You take a photo?" And then they go, "Yeah." And then they go, "Can I have a look?" Well, it's on film, and they'd just kind of laugh, and maybe I'd exchange a number saying I could send you a print, or they'd just say, "Have a good day." So, yeah, I tend to quickly find out it's just better just to kind of shoot and get the shot that I wanted, rather get them in that moment, that candid kind of moment, I suppose.
Absolutely. And Sally also asks, what lens do you use?
35 mil. It was when I was doing the mixed feelings, I was using predominantly the 35 mil. I did use a 28, but I found the 35 mil is pretty much a perfect lens, for what I wanted to achieve. And being a small camera, using a rangefinder cameras, they're small. I was using a Leica M2, so people would come up and go, "Was it an heirloom camera? Or can I look at your camera and stuff?" So, and then sometimes that camera would stand out a bit because it's quite silver as well, which is good and bad. Yeah, but yeah, pretty standard kind of kind of wide angle lenses.
Yeah. And Denise Laurie, Denise says, a wonderful presentation, and thank you for that. And she asks, she's curious as to the name of the paper you found that gives such great images without color cast.
It's a Mohawk Superfine. So it comes from the US, and fortunately it costs quite a bit more now because of shipping, and as well as the production costs as well of that's gone up as well, but particularly shipping coming from the US. But Mohawk Superfine is the name of that paper.
Yep. And just a comment from Susan Brunieldi, just saying thank you for sharing your personal journey with us there, Phil. And Sally Coggle had a similar comment as well.
No problems. Thank you.
So how are we? Do we have any further questions for Phil? I'll hand it back to you, Russ.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a few questions. It's just with regard to the film stock that you're using them for the book, and you're saying you're pushing it a couple of stocks. So were you doing that? Or what is the film stock that you're using? And also, you're doing the processing that way to get your blacks, or are you trying to get some grain happening there, or what's
grain? And also because I was using when I was shooting the projects, I was predominantly using HP5.
Yeah.
And pushing it to stops purely because I like to shoot anywhere between f11 to f16 or f18 using a Zeiss lens with the bright middle, usually often out in the middle of the day, so that high key And yes, also the grain as well is really nice when it's pushed, particularly HP5. It has a really nice grain to it that I really like.
And you said you said you were processing your own stuff as well. What are you using for that?
No, in the end, I didn't process it. I was just getting so much film, and I just couldn't. There's no way of keeping up with it all, so I was just sending it out externally to get processed. So I was using, I think, a CPO I used to do most of my processing, because I got in touch with Jesse Marlowe, because he actually doesn't do any of his own processing of black and white film, or hasn't for a while. And he said, "Oh, go to CPL. They do a good job." So I ended up going there, which the cost did start to add up, I might add, after
Very
a while.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for that. But I can't let you go without you giving a plug of where you can get the book and when it's going to come out. Give us a few more details on that.
The book, I'm hoping the book is coming out at least. I'm still deciding whether to do a short run, which might be about 100 copies, which I guess I'll be promoting through social media, through Instagram, or through my website to set it up properly. So I'm thinking within the next 6 months, I'm hoping to go. It's just, I guess, trying to work out how it's going to be funded and what's what's going to be the best way moving forward, particularly with the cost, like I said, of getting the book. Shipping the book overseas is a bit of a problem at the moment. So I watch this space.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time tonight. On behalf of the AASPI members in the community, I'd like to thank you for that. If anyone would like to go and have a view of more of your work, you have a website there? And
Yes. Yep. Just go up onto my website. It's got all the bodies of work on my website, and otherwise
philroubin.net.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. Yep.
And what's your Instagram handle for those guys?
It's just Phil Roubin. Yep, for my Instagram. So yeah, there's just some of the work from some of the projects is on there, or just work that that's kind of almost like offcuts from the Mixed Feelings project, as well as some of the photos from the Mixed Feelings project as well.
So Phil, just a late question here from Guy Sansom, and he wants to know about pre-orders. And can you get in on that?
Yes, Guy did send me a DM last year. I'm sort of definitely will be taking some pre-orders. I'll definitely be in touch, Guy, when that comes in the next few months, when I have a more of a concrete idea of how many books I'm going to be publishing in the first run. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Oh, thank you very much for that. And that was a brilliant start to the series for 2022. And if you'd like to revisit this session or any of the others in like the last few years series, you can find them on our YouTube channel. And if you don't know how to get there, we've made it easier with links on our website. So the series will continue next month with the speaker series being scheduled for the second Tuesday of each month. I think next month we have a session with Andrew Ravenko. So hope you've all enjoyed tonight, and hope this has served as some sort of inspiration to get you back out on the streets with your camera. So that's what we're all about. So thank you for joining us, and hope to see you out on the street. So stay safe, and see you next month. All right, good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.